What is going on, everyone? Hadex Gaming here, and today I'm bringing some bad news. This will be the last episode of my Forever World. With the release of 1.0 only a month or so away, continuing this world seems like a poor way to start preparing for 1.0. With the release of 1.0 will also bring forever expanding world generation, similar to how Minecraft does it, so creating a new world will be the best way to experience that. But this episode will bring a ton of fun. I plan on bumping my difficulty up to brutal mode and taking down each and every boss at least once, and working my way up to a tier 5 Sun and Moon champion fight on brutal mode. Now I'm a little overgeared in tier 5 armor, which I think is perfectly fine, as it's a great way to showcase just how far this character and just how far this world has come, and that means these initial bosses should be a breeze. Let's jump into the very first boss of the game, the Evil's Protector, to start us off. But first, let's set my difficulty to brutal mode. Now these first initial bosses will be a cakewalk, defeating the Evil's Protector in an instant. I've got tier 5 armor and weapons, and these bosses are technically tier 0, or even technically even 1, so these fights should go down instantly. Jumping into boss number 2, the Queen Spider of the Snow Caves. Again, an absolute breeze, with no time for the spider to even retreat. Boss number 3 is the Runebound Chieftain. This is an easy fight, and if it wasn't tier 5, I'd almost say that the minions could almost pose more of a threat on brutal mode than the boss itself. I'm also indifferent to the wave mechanic that this boss has, as it doesn't feel like a boss fight per se until the very end. It's still enjoyable nonetheless, and another boss down. Moving on to the desert, we have the Ancient Vulture, who I think goes down faster than all the bosses we have fought yet. An easy boss this late in the game, but a difficult one during natural progression on brutal mode. Delving into the Swamp Caves, the Swamp Guardian at this rate can be easily beaten down, but if you weren't over-prepared and over-geared, the more damage you do to it, the more it shoots projectiles, which can two-shot you in brutal mode at that point of the game. A difficult boss at that point, but very easy for me now. And then finally, for the beginner bosses, we head on over to tackle the Pirate. This is a boss you absolutely need an arena for in brutal mode, as each pirate minion can two-shot you, so to do so you just make a wall and stay inside of it to keep safe. This way the pirates and the birds don't get to you, and you can tackle the pirate one-on-one. However, this time around the pirate didn't even get a chance to get to his ship. So with the pirate down, we are now able to take on the deep mode bosses across all the biomes again, except this time they have incursions. This now means I'll be tackling the tier 5 versions of these bosses. And just before I do that though, I completely forgot that the Cursed Crone exists in the deep plains, and she doesn't have an incursion. So this is just a fun little game of tic-tac-toe for a tier 1 deep mode boss. I also just want to mention that for those who have supported me through this series, I highly appreciate it. It's been such a fun journey with you all here, and I can't wait to see what 1.0 has to offer. And to be honest, the Cursed Crone is a boss I've never fought on brutal mode before, but for now it didn't pose a threat. In my excitement to get to the tougher bosses, I also forgot all about the Void Wizard, so I went and found one and swiftly took him down. As I had mentioned previously, the original deep mode bosses all have incursions, which means I can fight them all on tier 5. Now I'm going to skip through the hunts and the extraction parts of the incursion, as the interesting part here is the boss fights. So, jumping into the Reaper boss fight. This fight I was using my melee set. I figured the Reaper uses melee, so I would too, just to make it interesting. With my melee set, I was guaranteed every hit to be a critical hit. I was doing well, but was a little rusty on this fight and ended up dying. I jumped right back into the fight, except this time with my summon set. This fight went much better. And yes, before anyone mentions it, I did forget to place down my banner flags. Not only would that have given me the speed boost needed to avoid the Reaper last time, but it would have given me the damage boost to also win. And it would have buffed my summons this time around too. The fight went much better and I ended up winning. Next up was the tier 5 Cryo Queen. This boss is probably one of my most challenging bosses, at least in my own opinion. I always seem to struggle with this one, and so skipping through the build-up of the incursion, I set up my banner flags and started the fight with my melee boomerang setup. I figured they home in on the queen and let me know her rough position as she flies about. This boss has a few mechanics. The first mechanic, she shoots out a spiral of ice, and to avoid it you just stand out of the way and you'll be fine. Following that move, she will move in a clockwise or anti-clockwise direction. Each time she does this move, she will swap which way she goes. So if she did clockwise this time, then the second time round will be counterclockwise, and so on. Once she finishes her spiral attacks, she will shoot waves of ice. These can be easily dashed past, but can leave you vulnerable for her next attack, her shotgun attack. She will fly towards the player and shoot out a shotgun burst of icicles. This can easily one-shot a player on brutal mode, so be cautious, and then she'll do that attack 3 times in a row before starting her mechanics rotation all over again with the ice spiral. So as far as the fight went, it was a long fight, but I took her down and won without any issues. Moving on to the Deep Swamp boss, the Pest Warden. This boss has caused me much pain over my brutal mode playthroughs, but the best strategy I found was to use a shield to negate some damage when it dashes through its coil, and then just use any piercing weapon or glaive you can find. This time round though, I didn't need the shield, I just used my bow build. These ravens do insane damage and tear through this boss with absolute ease. This bow build may just be too powerful for the game. Descending into the deep desert, we have the tier 5 Sage and Grip fight. Usually for this fight, I'd like to clear out a bigger arena, but as you can see, my bow build utilizes the gelatin casing, which causes my ravens to bounce around the place. This means the more things it can bounce off, the more damage I can cause it to do. Similar to the Pest Warden, this is a worm-like boss with multiple segments that can be hit, meaning anything with piercing damage will do crazy damage. Now I never fully learned this boss's mechanics, aside from don't get hit and run in circles during his lasers, but my ravens made mincemeat out of both of them. Now you're probably wondering if I'll include the Fallen Wizard. I've intentionally left out the official final boss of Necesse, as 1.0 will most likely bring out a new boss, and the current final boss also doesn't have a tier above 0 or its own incursion. So moving on with the incursion only bosses now, the Slime boss. Whilst not super difficult, it can pack a punch and corner you quickly. As you can see on the minimap, I died twice just trying to get to the boss, and thought I'd try out my magic set. This boss only has a few mechanics, a basic movement attack where it may bounce on you, and then Slam where it spawns waves of slimes that you have to avoid. Following that, it will spawn minions and then just repeat. However, when it is nearly dead, it will enrage and move much quicker. This is what always catches me off guard, and I died this time round with the boss at 0.7 HP. No stress, I figured magic wasn't for this boss and I'd try melee. That being said, I was met with a fast, swift to death and realized that summons may be the way to go, as I just have to avoid his big slime waves and the slime itself while my minions do all the work. A not too difficult boss, but oddly enough, it's the boss that I've died the most to so far. Following the slimes and moving on to the next incursion unique boss is the Crystal Dragon. This incursion gives crystal rewards, which can be used to make crystal armor that changes depending on what type of crystal is used. Each one of these sets can be classified as best in game with the right enchantments, and makes these incursions well worth doing. The fight itself is a generic worm-like fight where you avoid the dragon, but it also has a few unique moves such as dashing towards you and shooting out crystal shards, and then it also spirals and shoots a laser. The boss also has one other mechanic where it just summons crystal golems, and you just have to fight the minions. As for the actual fight, I also prefer to keep the arena pretty small, as it allows my ravens to bounce around. But I found with a small arena, I also get more coverage from the minions. There's nothing worse than trying to dodge the boss only to get sniped by another enemy. And as you would have just seen, I got sniped by 2 minions, causing me to use my lifeline and be just one shot away from death. I didn't think I was going to win this one, but I somehow managed to clutch it. Moving into the next boss, and probably a boss I give way too much praise to, is the Spider Empress. Not only does she have an amazing boss lair with a huge throne and epic castle-like design, but the boss itself gives massive puppeteer or marionette vibes, which just perfectly ties into the spider aesthetics working with webs or strings. The boss design itself is creepy, but still strikes as royalty, and the boss mechanics are also fun. So, for the mechanics of this boss, they are as follows. When she spawns in, she will run towards the middle of the arena, as per most bosses, and then she does a death by million cuts kind of attack, where you just need to not be standing in the lines as they cut through. Following that attack, she will distance herself and then dash towards the player in a net of webs. Between each attack, she will also use the death by million cuts, so she will repeat that one. And then for her final mechanic, she spews out an acid line and then does another death by million cuts. The million cuts attack is pretty much done between each attack she does. After a full rotation, she will also enrage. Now, I beat her faster than you could see it, but essentially it's just like the previous attacks, but on roids and a bit more spiced up. Her million cuts goes on for far longer, her acid lines become 3 acid lines, and her dashes become even more dashes. It's very tough to live past, so damaging her down fast during the regular phase is recommended, and then play it safe during the enrage. So, with another boss down, she dropped the Slime Glaive, a weapon I've never really used, but it does look really cool. But I'm getting distracted, and we're on to now the final 3 bosses of Necesse. The final 3 remaining are the Night Swarm Bats, the Lunar Dancer, and the Sunlight Champion. So let's jump right in with a tier 5 Night Swarm Bats. I decided to try my magic mines build for this one again, as the bats tend to move a lot, so I figured the mines would eventually hit a bat and do quite a lot of damage. So let's see how the fight turns out. As you can see, the fight didn't turn out in my favor, and I instead returned with my bow build yet again, as it has proved time and time again to just be an absolute boss destroyer. And as you can see, this bow is absolutely mincing the boss in just seconds. However, raw DPS isn't everything, and my inability to dodge and just spam ravens wasn't quite the strategy and finesse that was needed for a boss like this. I think there are about 8 movement patterns they do in a rotation, but I've never learnt them properly and just go by dodging, strafing, and just powering my way through like an absolute caveman. But I returned for a 3rd time and remembered to place down my buff flags and just started tearing lines through these bats. It's actually crazy to see the damage and destruction that you can do with the correct buffs. Just as I was getting closer to defeating the boss, I nearly, and I mean extremely close to died by an incursion explosion modifier. If I rewind just a bit and zoom in, you can see just how close I was to getting absolutely obliterated. That explosion would have sent me to the Shadow Realm. With the bats gone, it's time we tackle the final 2 bosses. Jumping right into the Lunar Dancer, this boss is another favorite of mine, and probably the most well-designed boss in the game. Now this might be a hot take, but I think this for a few reasons, and I'm happy for you to disagree with me on this one. But I think the mechanics are flawless, and the design is impeccable. A starlight lunar jester just floating around the stars in an arena that is so visually pleasing, it's just perfection to begin with, but the part that makes it stand out is the mechanics. So for the mechanics, first of all, there is a giant moon that follows the player. Yes, it can be a nuisance, but it ensures the player is always moving. Then for the second mechanic, it has its own mechanic where it becomes shielded or hidden in the light, and the player has to collect stars in order to protect yourself from the starlight attack. No other boss in the game has a time-gated mechanic or a mechanic that's not just crush the player and spawn minions or projectiles. You need to strategize speed into this fight to ensure you win. And then as for the actual fights, it pretty much was over the second it started. Nothing really stands their ground against a decked out tier 5, near 100% attack speed, increasing crit hitting monstrosity that bounces back and causes incredible damage like this bow. With the fight down, we had just one fight left, the Sunlight Dancer. This boss is my hardest boss in the game. One, I'm not a fan of the stadium or the arena. I find it's too bright and blends all of the boss visuals into the same 3 colors. And the second reason is that those hands can randomly just decide to lock in and not leave the player. This makes it feel very RNG based, as for whatever reason, these hands will just stick to the player, causing the player to almost die instantly. And as you can see, that's exactly what happened, but this time it was more my fault than anything. Jumping in for fight number 2, the hand locked into my position and just hovered on me rather than flying around. And then I returned for fight number 3, I gave it my all, buffing up, placing buff banners down, and even utilizing a summon with my range build. And whilst I was doing insane damage, I let greed get the better of me and died again. Jumping into fight number 4, I had all my buffs, my summons, and tried again. This time I tried to take it a bit more safe and try to maximize distance. I made sure to get enough damage off at the start, and then just took shots when I could. The hands still found their way to me, causing me to lose my lifeline and rest at 1 hit away from death, but I bobbed and weaved, and I killed the final boss in Necesse. Now this again is before version 1.0, so a new final boss may emerge. But I have had a ton of fun, and with this boss rush has given me new ideas for new challenges that I plan to do. So stick around, and if you've made it this far, why not drop a quick like and even a comment what you think is your favorite boss and why. So with all of those bosses out of the way, here is what one of each boss looks like worth of loot on tier 5 only. As you can see, there are tons of weapons and armor, crazy amounts of biome resources and ore, incursion only rewards and essences, and a ton of upgrade and alchemy shards. Not too bad, especially if you're going to buff up your settlers as well. And anyway, here is what this full island looks like. A crazy castle that I never really got around to finishing. A magical fairy garden that I still think is one of my best builds to date. Tons of housing and a stock barn full of animals. And then I also have one of every crop, every tree, every fruit, and then I've also got every biome incorporated into my island, including a crystal and graveyard biome. I have a fully automated settlement that, as you can see, generates immense wealth with 100,000 coins passively. I have one of each type of animal that can be leashed, including a full beehive area, and I even kept the original brick house from when we moved into this place, and a singular gravestone marking my first death. Quite a while since then, and many more came, but I had so much fun from starting this way back in January, and I hope you all enjoyed this series, and I hope to see you all again in my next endeavor. Have yourselves a wonderful time zone, so that means good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you may be, and I hope to see you next time.